Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Outside the Box Conversations, and we are going outside the box today because I got Angel Ogden together. I got Angel Ogden here with me today at Brain Balance. And first of all, how are you? We met about 15 minutes ago. I've gotten to know you a little bit. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thank you for being here.
You're a Knoxville native.
I am, yes, from North Knoxville.
I grew up in Oak Ridge.
Okay.
And my dad worked in Clinton for a long time, and then we moved to Kingsport my sophomore year. I was the new kid in school.
Oh.
Were you ever the new kid?
Yeah, no. Thankfully, no.
How do you think you would have dealt with it?
Considering I probably was one of those kids that needed brain balance, not well. Yeah, just...
Actually, I love that because I was probably that way too. I just didn't realize it at the time. There probably wasn't a thing called brain balance during my day. Yeah. But why don't you tell us what brain balance is?
Okay. It's really hard to explain. Oftentimes people don't understand. And even when you've seen it, it's hard to really communicate. But when you think about developmentally as kids grow, and then somewhere along the way, they may struggle, whether it's with learning, behavior, social issues. It's not always because they're a bad kid or that they're dumb or whatever the labels we want to put on them. It's usually just that something got missed. And so what we do here at Brain Balance is go back and naturally recreate those developments in the body and in the brain through very specific exercises and also sensory stimulation. This is kids, whether they're diagnosed or not, that it can help with lots of different issues or concerns.
I would imagine that so many kids have some things that are missing just from a pure, nutrition standpoint. I know a lot of it's environment. How do you tell? Like, how can you tell if your kid or if if you know someone's kid, if they have a developmental problem or something that's a little slower?
Right. Honestly, I think oftentimes parents just know, if you're really in tune and involved with your children. And, unfortunately, a lot of people will say, well, don't compare. It's not good to compare. Everyone's different. But there's oftentimes that intuitiveness of just knowing something's not right, or why do they struggle so much in this area? Why are things harder for them? So that's one way. But then there are sometimes obvious reasons. Oftentimes families will come in because teachers pick up on it and, realize that this child is struggling in a certain area that, is not age appropriate. So there's lots of ways. I really encourage parents to, listen to their gut and their heart. And, if they feel like something's going on, it's better just to have it checked out.
It's super fascinating. And I know I'm not a parent, so I speak obviously not out of experience, but I would imagine it'd be difficult to be able to see that, I'm sure as a parent, you see your kid as being perfect in many ways and obviously biased. Have you ever had to coach parents on anything like that?
I will say most families that come here, they know.
Okay.
It's very odd. Occasionally we'll, assess siblings because the parent's curious. But usually the parents that come here, it's because they realize something's going on or a teacher has made them aware of something. It's very rare. Occasionally we will get where one parent sees it and then the other one, you have to help them along and realize that, what the other parent is saying, this is why developmentally, this, when we assess them, this is why you're seeing that. And I think the other big thing for parents to realize is it's not their fault. It's not something they did.
Yeah. And that's a huge message out there for so many people. I've got kind of a funny story when I was talking about being biased. When I was in kindergarten, we had a meeting with my kindergarten teacher. I think it was just my mom and dad, and maybe I was there. And my dad goes to the teacher, and he looks the teacher in the eye. His name was Mr. Rushton. And he goes, Mr. Rushton, can you confirm our suspicions that Ben is a genius? and Mr. Rushton looks my dad straight in the eye and he goes, no. he's not a genius. So I found that, Dad tells that story a lot, and no, I'm not a genius. But I would imagine just the whole, parent-kid relationship is such an interesting one. What do you think about environment? Like a lot of the people watching here are really concerned with their own health, and they're trying to take care of themselves. Does that, translate into, kids? Can that be helpful in any regard?
Absolutely. All the time parents are asking us what caused this, and honestly, we don't know. It can be different for all. We do know genetics is an issue, but if you read even on the CDC, they say that one of the top 3 concerns is environment, and that's, what they do, and also the foods that we eat. So thinking about how things have changed over the years, kids are less active, our food has changed, we're eating more processed foods. So definitely that can play a big role. In rare cases, we also see where trauma is that top third reason. So
is there things that you're seeing in kids that someone in your position wasn't seeing in kids, say 20 years ago when you and I were smaller? Like, is there, because you mentioned the food thing, and I've got to think that has had some sort of impact on behavior, developmental issues. Are you seeing any of that in your practice?
We definitely have seen a shift. Brain balance is about 14 years old. And in the beginning, some of the issues that we saw then is definitely shifting. Definitely seeing a lot more students come in with allergies. Also seeing students that more of the impulsivity, lack of focus, where before it was, we also saw the dyslexia or learning challenges. So yeah, there's definitely a change in what we're seeing.
So how do you coach people on that? Because we're in a different world now. Everything is so digital. There can be so many distractions, and there's so many opportunities, things for kids to do. Yes. How do you coach them on how to stay focused? How do you not be distracted in a distracted world?
That's really a tough thing because sometimes these kids can't. They physically cannot attain. They cannot focus because they've not developed those parts of the brain. So that can be part of it. And so, even when you start developing that part of the brain, we still have to train ourselves. As adults, most of us have developed that part of the brain, but we find ourselves distracted. And so, you have to look at the load on the brain and can we handle that load? Can we handle when there's background noise and things like that? So there's also some training involved with that as well. And, with any training, it's usually practice. Practicing doing multitasking, multi-skills, multi-sensory type things, and just really getting the eyes and the ears and the brain to attune.
I'm fascinated with the eyes in particular. I've done quite a bit of eye work through my athletic career, and it's fascinating, the relationship between your eyes and your brain. And do you do anything in terms of like following things with your eyes with the kids? Is that a thing?
We do. I mean, the eyes are a muscle, and so you have to work them and build them and strengthen them. So yes, a lot of tracking. Even, we want kids to be aware of what's in their peripheral vision, but look and attain and focus, for safety reasons. You even think down the road when you're driving, I have to be aware of what's going on, but yet keep my eyes attained. So that's one of the skills too that we work with the kids is, what we call visual focus and attaining to things. But yes, the tracking, working on that depth perception and the going in and out with the eyes. So yes, eyes are a huge part of the program.
Is there any correlation between the work that you do with kids and, everyone here, I'm sure, including myself, is concerned about dementia and Alzheimer's and staying, mentally fit, for, as long as possible. Is this type of work helpful for even the people that's watching that might not be a kid?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And, you think growing up, I always heard sit up and pay attention. And of course, now I realize that that's so true, that it really, your posture, movement, all activate the brain. Your muscles, engaging those muscles activate the brain. And so that's important for everyone as we get older. Really paying attention to your posture, your core strength, those kind of things. If you're sitting down for 30, 45 minutes, get up and move. You're going to re-engage and reactivate the brain. And, that's the same thing even as we age. And a lot of people say you lose that capacity or ability, but that may not necessarily be true. There's a lot of research now correlating our core health and that brain activity and dementia, Alzheimer's kind of things. So.
When you say core health, do you mean just like a strong core, that sort of thing, posture, those sort of things? Because that's stuff we all can do.
Absolutely.
Every single day.
Yes.
Do you have any specific exercises that you like? Anything that you're practicing in your own life?
Yeah, absolutely. Plank is probably one of the best. I love planks. The forward and lateral plank, because it does work, all of that. Anything that engages the core, though, we talk about with our families, getting the kids active, even walking on uneven surfaces is making me engage my core. Sitting on an exercise ball, watching TV instead of, on the couch, lounged back. There's lots of ways and fun ways that you can engage that core and help with the posture and a way you hold your body. So.
One thing that it just popped in my head as I was listening to you, when I was training a lot for tennis, we would do some exercises where you would do something athletic and also have to answer questions. Mm-hmm. What's happening there? Why is that important? Because there was I would be doing some sort of cardiovascular exercise, and then I'd be asked a math question, or I'd be doing those skater slide things, and they'd be tossing me a ball, so I had to keep my eyes focused on where the ball was while I was maintaining this movement. Is that something that you would do with kids?
Absolutely.
What's happening there?
Yeah. So, going back to some of the different phrases you hear, but what fire together, wire together. So the more things that you're doing at one time, then the greater that capacity is in the brain. And so if I'm just doing a physical activity, my brain may be basically shutting off and, in its own little world. But if I'm engaging that and having to think and focus, then that's more connections that we're making in the brain. And so thinking about in a classroom, a student is not just listening. They're oftentimes listening, writing, reading. They're expected to do so many things. And as we get older, that multitask is even greater in the things that we have to do. Going back to that load, what's the load on our brain and our body, and how much can we handle? So if we train our brain and body to handle a lot at one time, then we're going to have that greater function and ability.
So how do you do that without, because you mentioned a big issue is distraction. Mm-hmm. And, a kid, oftentimes adults, we treat a lot of adult ADHD, they can't focus.
Right.
So it seems like that would be conflicting.
You start low.
Okay.
We start at where their capability is. And one of the ways that we start easy is we use our senses. So I may be working on the core, but I also have a shaker device on my arm that's vibrating, that's causing a distraction. Then we'll put glasses on that have a flashing light that's causing a distraction, and I'm having to work through it. So it's building those senses and that sensory, because that's how we take in information, is through our senses. So that's one of the ways. And then as we progressing it better, we're doing exactly what you're saying. We're asking questions, say the alphabet backward while standing on one leg. There's so many fun things that you could do. But yes, it does progress to where they're at until we build that load.
For the record, I think there's no chance I could say the alphabet backwards.
Not correctly, right?
Especially standing on one leg.
Yeah.
There's no chance I could be sober-ready, and there's no chance I could do it.
Yeah.
But, it's just a really interesting thing. You mentioned sensory, and flashing light is the goal, because I know that's what you guys are doing, is you're forcing some of these distractions, but you want the kid not to bother them. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of the end goal?
That's correct, right? Almost desensitizing, correct.
So why does it? So most kids are oversensitized. Mm-hmm. So little things will bother them.
Overstimulated, right?
Does that have anything to do with OCD behavior or anything like that?
There are some connections, but more of your hyperactivity. Oftentimes, you'll see families that say we can't go out to eat because we get in a restaurant and my kid gets agitated. And you got to think about the lighting, think about the music. The environment can oftentimes overstimulate and cause them to be hyper. But also thinking about left and right brain, left side that causes that hyperactivity is our gas pedal. And thinking about OCD, then that's where, everything has to be in a particular order pattern. And I don't have that break on that right side to say stop, it's okay. And that I don't have to be so compulsive about it or obsessive. So yeah, similar parts of the brain.
What's interesting to me, and I know this is something that you guys deal with every day, but a lot of these uniquenesses in a kid, you want to work to somebody's strengths, and you don't want them to like kind of fit in the box. You know what I mean? So like, how do you help a kid with, some of these areas in their life where it's going to affect them negatively later on, where they have to, they really need to fix this, but also maintain what makes them them, right. Because sometimes, people, they like doing lots of different things and they're not necessarily rule followers, and that can really work for them, later on in life in many ways. How do you kind of manage that? Do you work with the parent at all?
Oh, absolutely. It is definitely a community event here where there's things that we let the parents know, and we want them, even the student, to know what their strengths are. Mm-hmm. You never want someone to come in thinking I'm here because something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
We tell them that one of our mottos is that, behind every student, there's a dancer or an astronomer or an engineer. There's so much capability, and we want to bring out the best. We want to, give them the tools that they need to be the best that they can potentially be. And so there is that balance. That's where the name Brain Balance comes in, is that we all tend to lean one way or another, but we've got to be balanced enough that we can function and function well and at high levels. And so that's what the goal is taking the good and the bad and working it all together to where we're even across the board.
Well, it's almost like helping them get out of their own way in many ways, so that their real talents and their uniqueness can really shine
through. Right.
That's awesome.
Because we're not changing personality either.
Right.
Everyone is different. Yeah. So
tell me your Brain Balance story. I know a little bit about it. Tell me how you got into this business, and I know it's been 5 years now.
Yeah. So I guess 6 years ago, our daughter went through the program in Atlanta, in Roswell, Georgia. At that time there wasn't the Brain Balance here, and we had sought for a long time to find something, just new. And, talking about don't compare, that was something we heard a lot. Don't compare, because it was our second child. But we just knew that, okay, this isn't comparing. She really struggles in these areas. And so she was 9 when she went through the program, and we had done other things and saw great results, but Brain Balance brought all of that together. It was like a one-stop shop for us. It was the first place that with the nutrition, I wasn't afraid to try the nutrition because they helped us so well. The program is laid out in such a way that it wasn't intimidating. And so after 3 months of her going there, we saw enough positive results that's when we knew we want to bring this to Knoxville, because not everyone can, obviously drive to Atlanta. It was definitely hard.
I'd imagine.
Yeah, so we drove it 3 days a week for 3 months, and
wow.
That's a task. So very rough summer, but I would have done it all over again if we hadn't, been able to open the center here. But definitely a godsend. We really feel like now we can offer that to families here and offer them that same hope that we had. Once we open, now all 3 of our children have gone through the program. Our son is actually finishing. He's got a month left. They all started with different needs and different goals in mind, but we have seen results with all 3. And that to me is amazing. Our oldest, we saw little results, but that's what our issues were little.
Sure.
Our son has been complete. I mean, he's probably your typical ADHD child, very hyper, very OCD. And, he would give up oftentimes and not want to do things because if he didn't think he could do it the first time, or the right immediately, he would just back off. And now we see him trying things and stepping out of his comfort zone. And so it's great to see, again, him reach that potential, without anything hindering him. Not that he doesn't struggle. He's still a 12-year-old boy. And so, that's, again, the great thing that they still are kids and they still have their own personalities. But, again, we're equipping them and giving them the tools that they need.
Well, and that's such a life skill, like to be able to be challenged,
Yes.
And face challenge and kind of, climb up that hill. And there's something about, I keep mentioning tennis just because it's such a big part of my life, but there's something about struggling at something and then seeing improvement.
Right.
No matter who you are, no matter what your personality traits are like, no matter what your uniqueness is, there's something about that. And if you can find something in your life where you can see these minor improvements, it's such a motivator.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's such a valuable thing for these kids to go through.
Well, I mean, you think we all want to excel in something. So if we never try, you don't have that reward and what that does in the brain. I mean, even that encouragingness. And
I can't imagine the impact it has on your brain.
Right.
I'm not nearly that smart as my dad found out so long ago. But so tell me that process where you were with your daughter in Roswell and to opening to where you are now. Like, was that a long process to get this thing going?
From the time she started Brain Balance to the time we opened here was a little over a year. And from the time she finished those 3 months, so then about 9 months to get opened. One thing that's great about Brain Balance, it is a franchise. And so there's a system and a pattern, and there's training that we all go through. This is not my background. Thankfully, I have worked with children and loved children enough that I wanted to do it. So I had a lot of learning to do. Sure. I had to take, some neurology 101 classes just so I had a background knowledge of what we were doing. Most of our coaches and staff have that already, so they're at an advantage to me. Then what they have to do is learn Brain Balance, learn what the program is and why we do what we do, and the actual steps and levels in the process.
So you mentioned, I'm assuming it's a 3-month program?
It varies. It depends. She actually was recommended, probably a year plus. But part of that is she does have a genetic that causes her not to be able to walk, normally. Okay. So we have to modify a lot. But most students that we see are between 4 and 8 months is normal. I would say 6 is probably the average, but my oldest, needed the 4. Okay. So it does vary. We do recommend that they start at least with a minimum of that 3, because thinking about anything that we do, it takes so much time to, number one, change habits, but then also make those changes in the brain so that you're seeing results. So 3 is the minimum.
Is there a sweet spot age-wise, out of curiosity?
Wow. I would say that what we see here the most is that 8 to 12-year-old, but we have seen results from as young as 4-year-olds. It's amazing. And then if you think about it, our brain is plastic, so to speak, or malleable. So even our older students, there's a lot, with little kids, you're also dealing with their 4. So maybe that 8 to 12, the reason is they're I don't know, more prone to work with you and do it. Sure. But really, we see growth and change with all ages. So that's...
Well, I know I'm digging deep here, but as far as the nutrition goes, have you seen it, noticed any overarching philosophy around nutrition that's really helpful for the brain and kids, and which probably translates to adults as well?
Yes, absolutely. Our program is really based on just clean eating. Okay. There is a time period that we request that the families cut out your top 3 inflammatory foods. So you're thinking of gluten, dairy, and refined sugars. However, we have families that's, all families come in at a different level. And what we say is progress. You want to make change in any small change usually is greatly impacted.
Sure.
So number one is cutting out some of the processed foods. I would say that, and cutting out refined sugars is probably the biggest impact that we see.
How tough is that for a parent? Because I obviously, I'm not a parent, as I've said a bunch this episode, but I would imagine that'd be very difficult. Be very difficult to cut that out of your grocery store run every single week, because I know a lot of these parents are just trying to get through the week and feed the kids and work and got all these things going on.
And then you're running this sport and that, so what you find is you're going fast food, and I think it takes more planning. That's probably the hardest. When we were going through the program, I literally would spend one day a week of just trying to plan and then shop and, think ahead. Okay, we've got soccer this night. We've got, piano, recital, those type things. And really think ahead of time and be prepared. Take snacks with us. Because that was the other thing I learned with my son, is when I cut out all of the processed, the kid can eat. And he would eat a lot. And so, if you're giving him carrot sticks, it's like, wow, he just ate that whole 1 pound bag of carrot sticks. I'm like, how? So, thinking through that, and it does take time, but the rewards are so great. One of the things I try to let parents know is, for myself, just in that 3-month period of time, I actually lost 8 pounds just by changing our diet. No other changes with activity, and found that I no longer had a pain in my hand and knee.
I believe
yes. So obviously that inflammation is what caused it, and so
that's just cutting out processed foods.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the refined sugars.
The sugar was huge for me, yeah. And so then once you do that and you eat those foods, I found I didn't want them anymore. That, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
So it makes it easier as you go along. So really the hardest is getting started in that beginning. And that's where, again, Brain Balance walked us through it step by step. They were there with us. They have all kinds of shopping guides, recipes, all those things for you to make it so much easier that you're not having to stand in the store for hours, thinking, should I eat this? Should I not? They've already taken out all of the guesswork.
I love that, and there's so much valuable information right there. It's amazing how, like, some of the most simple things can have the biggest impact,
Yes.
and you're talking impact, for the rest of your life. Not just 8 pounds, but like the way your brain functions, and obviously the way your kid grows up, and develops. Now, one thing that I was thinking of as you're talking about the process is, can you be too strict as a parent, even, on yourself as well as on your kids? Because I remember being a kid, with friends who had households where they were very strict. Mm-hmm. And then, they'd do anything to get over to my house or someone else's houses. And, and they'd be crushing Cokes and, Mountain Dews. Yeah. Is there a balance there?
I'm sure Brain Balance may disagree. But as from the mom, absolutely. I will say I love Doritos. So every so often I eat Doritos. And I think if you allow yourself that, you're less likely to splurge and to, just absolutely fall off the bandwagon, so to speak.
I agree. And I think, as you're raising kids, it's important to, give them some flexibility,
yes.
some room, but also, helping them develop, the taste for some of the healthy foods, right. Which I'm sure is what, the first 3 months in Brain Balance is about, is just learning to like some of this stuff.
Well, and, I think a lot of parents are intimidated because they're like, well, they have texture issues or they have this. And, I tell parents, I'm not teaching your child to eat, but as we're working on some of these sensory issues along with what we're doing in center, they naturally begin to try new foods. So all your job is to offer it to them. And as they try it, then again, my son loves carrots, raw carrots, and who would have thought? But, because they were there, one day he tried it. So yeah, by offering that to them, they do start developing these tastes and start making themselves better decisions because they feel their bodies and they realize, this doesn't make me feel good and this does. So that's ultimately what we want, is for them to grow up and to be able to make those decisions for themselves.
So I'm assuming that the parents will very clearly be able to notice some of the differences in their children. You mentioned to me that your daughter started to, I think it was your older daughter, who was starting to be able to understand, I used to not be able to hear that, when she was on the soccer field or whatever. Do the kids normally, can they tell a difference? Because they're so young.
It definitely varies, right? Obviously, your younger kids may not be able to, but oftentimes our older students can. They'll come in and say, hey, I passed this test today and I've always struggled in this subject, and I can remember now when I couldn't. Or, my favorite, I think, is one of our very first students here that came in, and I was in my office and I thought, who in the world is that? I just hear this, chattering up front, and I look down the hall and she's all excited and animated. And I'm like, I've never seen her like that. And she was telling us that she had made a friend at school.
That's cool.
So that is where, it helps us, here, because it's hard work to see the results too, when they come in and can communicate that. Yeah. And again, it definitely depends on the age. Younger kids may not get it. They're just here having fun. And to them, it's play. It's just organized play. Yeah. But the older kids can see it.
That's super cool. And one thing I will mention is, just the impact that this can have on the family unit. As a lot of people that watch this know, both my brother and my sister were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when they were, I believe, 9 and 14. And it really impacted the way we did things. And, we changed, so much of what was in the fridge, what was in the pantry, things got way more organized out of necessity. And it's just interesting how things like this, and I'm sure with, any sort of developmental thing with a child, can impact the whole family unit. And it sounds to me, based on your experience, like it can really be a positive.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And when you think about the change too, sometimes it's just getting to know your child. We've had parents say, wow, I feel like I know my child now. Or we actually get along, or we can go to a restaurant, or, those type things that they just, weren't comfortable doing before, maybe because of behavior issues. Or, I even remember a mom one time saying, now we don't fight at home. And it was all because the student didn't struggle as much doing the homework. And, when they would struggle, and then they would get frustrated, and then they would be this big blow up. And so, those type things also, just the changes in the environment at the house, because, the struggles aren't there. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so important. And any, because I want to be respectful of your time, is there any parting advice you have for the people watching this, just with their own brain health, how they can improve their lives through some simple things like the unrefined sugar and the processed foods? I've just heard so many stories about them cutting out sugar and it just changing everything. Yes. I know it's difficult, but man, if you're wanting to see real impact, that's one way. Any other like movement stuff besides the planks?
I mean, just being active in general. Again, one of the things that our family did that was really hard, because grandparents, are buying all these tablets and different things, is we got rid of a lot of that. We don't have cable anymore. And so, getting out the old board games and playing with your kids, getting outside more. And, we live in such a beautiful area that we have wonderful seasons. So, take a walk around the neighborhood, do something in the backyard. I think that's probably the biggest thing we've learned as a family, is just being active as a family, doing fun things together, playing those games instead of that sedentary lifestyle.
Is there any games that you recommend, out of curiosity? Any cool, I know like things like ping pong are great for your brain. Anything
visual tracking, yeah.
Anything you guys do?
Oh, there are so many. I mean, you think about most of your older games are really designed for hand-eye coordination, and you think of pickup sticks, jacks. I mean, there's so many great ones. Our family, we play so many of them. I'm trying to think. I think one of our favorites is an old one. As a matter of fact, we lost a piece and I had to find it. It's not made anymore, but it's called Bonkers. So,
I don't know that one.
yeah, I know it's not many people, but card games too. We love card games.
Okay.
Stratego. My kids like perfection. I will say that sensory for me. Woo, yeah. I hate it when it pops, but it's a great hand-eye, coordination thing of getting all those shapes in there. So there's a lot of good ones. Yeah.
That reminds me, if you've seen the movie Elf, there's a segment where he's on the toy line with the toy that pops out.
Yeah, Jack in the Box.
Jack in the Box. And it didn't pop out, and he was like waiting on it, frozen. That would freak me out.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're going to wrap up, guys. This has been Angel Ogden. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us where Brain Balance is. We're in Knoxville, Tennessee. Shout out to Knoxville. Shout out to Robin Riddle, our newest nurse practitioner in Knoxville. Angel, where can people find you?
So we are located on Kingston Pike, directly on Kingston Pike. It's 10341 Kingston Pike. We're across, and after saying no processed foods, we're across from Pizza Hut. So not always a good thing, or the barbecue place that smells wonderful when you walk in the door.
Don't tell me that. It's almost lunchtime.
Yeah, but in the white buildings, up on the hill, kind of
beautiful spot.
So yeah, absolutely.
Website? Any website we can send people
So
to?
it is brainbalance.com, and then when you go in there, because we're a franchise, you could put in a zip code, and if you're in this area, it's going to bring up Knoxville, which is the great thing too. When you go there, you could see pictures and bios of our staff, because one of the reasons most of us are here is we either have a child or we ourselves understand. So yeah,
super cool. It's been so good getting to know you. Like, this has been a blast. I really do appreciate it. Guys, this has been Outside the Box Conversations. I'm with Angel Ogden from Brain Balance. I'm your host, Ben Rogers. How am I ending? I forgot how I'm ending, but don't go away, because we're coming back next time. See you guys.
Don't go away.